Hello everyone. Hope you're doing good and you are safe wherever you are in the world. So today in this video we'll be looking into Office scripts and how to integrate Office scripts in Power Automate. So talking about Office script is a newer addition to Excel which we can use to automate your common basic mundane repetitive tasks which you perform in workbooks as well as worksheets of Excel. So you have either two options which you can go through, which where one is you record your actions and you create a set of actions which you can play and which will perform the same set of actions again and again. And the other one is you write a code in TypeScript which you can execute whenever you want to perform the action. So the basic advantage of TypeScript over VBA, which has been existing since a long time for doing such automations, is that TypeScript is compatible with all operating systems, which means you don't need to change your script based on which operating system you're going to use the Excel on. So that is a major advantage over VBA, where VBA is very limited with the operating systems. So let's look into how to use Office scripts in Excel Online as well as Excel. So first talking about Excel Online, which you can have if you have an E3 or an E5 subscription, is firstly before going to the Excel Online, what you have to do is go to office.com with the admin email logged in, and you will see something called admin as an option. Now, if you go to the admin center, you will have all the options to set users, roles, and things like that. So under settings, you might see settings or org settings here, whichever subscription you have. And in settings, you basically have a way to set all the related apps to your Office 365 account. And there you will see something called Office scripts. So click on Office scripts and it will give you an option to either enable or disable automation of tasks in your Office account. So you will have to enable it so if you want the option to be seen in your Excel Online. Now, if you go to Excel Online, you will see that there is a ribbon option for automate. And you have two options here, either to record your actions or to have a code editor launched. So now I have launched the code editor and I have a script launched. So this is about Excel Online. Now, if you want to know how to use Office scripts in Excel, it is also available if you have Excel 2003 or higher. So, for which you can launch the Excel, and in the Insert tab, you will find something called Get Add-ins. So, Get Add-ins is an extension for Excel in which you can find something called Script Lab. So, if you add Script Lab to your Excel, it will add a tab in the ribbon with the name Script Lab. If you select Script Lab, here you can find options to either run or write functions for Excel, which is basically Office scripts for your 2003 or higher in your desktop rather than using Excel Online. So if you click on code, it will open a code editor. So if you expand, you will see the entire scripts tab, which you have in which you can write your code, as well as you have options to run, share, and do things like that. So now storing this Excel or Excel scripts is basically in GitHub, a source control which is used. So if you don't want to use GitHub, then you can store these files in your local as well. So this is for Script Lab in Excel. Now for the sake of the demonstration, we will be using Power Automate as well. So for that, we'll be using Excel Online and the Office scripts in Excel Online. So now that I have some code already written here, let me quickly delete this and start a new one. So this is a new script here. So when you launch a script, basically it will have this function where in which you will write your code, which will be executed when you run the code, and there'll be a default parameter which will be the workbook instance. So this will be the workbook on which the operations inside this will be performed. If you run this particular script inside an Excel, like we are doing here, then it will take the current instance of the Excel as the workbook on which the operations will be performed. But if we are doing it from Power Automate, then we will have to send the workbook which we will be using to execute the script on. So we will look into that in a while. So first let us write a script which will basically copy this particular set of responses and create a new sheet and dump it there. So basically the requirement is that when you have a particular worksheet linked to certain workflows, which is basically bringing data and populating it into this worksheet, and if you want to segregate the sheets on a daily basis or segregate it on manual requirements whenever you want, then you can use such workflows where you can run the script through Power Automate, which can either be schedule triggers or manual triggers or triggered using some other application, which can dump all these records to your sheet, and it can also mark whether the process was successful or not. Here, the process successful or not is a measurement where we are just measuring if it could create a worksheet under the name which was provided to it, and if there was a worksheet already existing in the name, then it would give a status as 0. That means the process failed because there was a sheet already existing. But based on your requirements, you can also tweak the response mechanism. So let us look at how to code the script. So as I've already mentioned, this is TypeScript. So we will be having certain flexibilities and powerful functions which we have in TypeScript. So for now, let's start by adding a new input, which will be the name of the worksheet. And this will, like I told you, be a return function which will return the status. So let us keep it either 1 or 0 depending on what input we want. Now it is throwing an error because technically we don't have a response coded in this function. Let us keep a default response which is of 1. So now that we have avoided the error, let us move on. So the first statement which we will write is to get the worksheet with the name which is provided in the input. So let us name a new variable, worksheet exists, and this will basically search for the worksheet with the name which we provide, and for that we need to add a get worksheet function to the workbook. So workbook.getWorksheet will give you the instance of the worksheet if it has the worksheet in the workbook, or it will return null. So simply let us check if the worksheet exists variable is null. So if it is null, that means that there was no worksheet with the name which the workbook has at that point of time. So we can create this worksheet. So for creating a worksheet, now let us add a worksheet with the same name, because we now know that the worksheet doesn't exist. So workbook dot add worksheet will give you the will help you create a worksheet with that name. Now what we need to do is we need to have column headers. So basically we have two columns in this table, ID and response terms. So in the same way we will have two columns in our worksheet. So worksheet dot get range. So get range will the entire range which we specify between cells. So the cells will be between A1 and B1 because we just need to add the column headers. Now we need to set the column header values. That means the names of the columns. So we will use set values because we have more than one, and we will use an array. So the array will be the order as well as the name of the column. So the first column will be ID and the next column will be response terms. So we need to enclose the array in brackets as well. So that is the syntax because it's a 2D one array. And now that we have added the row of column headers, now we need to create a table out of it. So for creating a table out of it, let us create a variable so that we have the reference of the table. So new table will have workbook dot add table. Now we need to give the instance of the worksheet because workbook might have multiple sheets like we have here. So worksheet dot get range, and we give the same range as we had the headers, which is A1, B1. And we also need to tell it whether there are column headers or not, so that it considers the first row which we have already initialized as the column headers. So we give the value true. So that is for creating our table. Now we need to get the rows from this dump. So for that, let us initialize a new variable rows, and that will be workbook dot get worksheet. Now get worksheet, we already know the name of this worksheet, which is dump. So now we need the reference of the table, which we will get from get table function. So we need to pass the identifier or the name of the table, which is table1 here. You can change the name of the tables as well. Programmatically, you can do that by using set table function. So let's move on. The next step what we need to do is to add these rows to the new table, which is in the new worksheet. So we will be using the same new table variable. We will use a function which will basically add the rows, which is add rows. So it is good to have this code editor which suggests all the relevant functions, which makes it easier for us to identify which we want. So here the first parameter is the index, that is the starting row from which we need to add. So as we are dumping it into a new table, we can give the index as 0 itself. So 0 comma. So the next parameter is the values which we will add to the new table. So that will be rows dot get range between header and total. So get range between header and total is a function which is basically going to give a range for all the rows between 2 and 11 here. So basically between the header and the last row. So this gives the range, and now inside the range we want all the values. So that will be given by get values. So this will again give a two-dimensional array of all the values which are present in the table 1 in dump sheet and which we can dump in the new table. Now that we already have a backup in the new table, we don't need these values in the dump table, right? In the table in the dump sheet. So for that, we can delete these rows. So for deleting the rows, we can do rows dot delete rows at. So here we need to give the starting index. Now here it is 0 because we need to delete it from the first row itself, and we need to give the count. So for the count, we can use rows dot again get range between header and total. So this will give the range, but now we don't want the values, we want the row count. So for that we can use get row count. So that concludes the actual code to copy. Now we need to handle the failure and the success scenarios. So like we already talked about, if we are able to find the sheet and we are able to copy all of this, then we will return 1. So return 1. Else, if we found a sheet which already existed with the same name, then we are going to return 0. So now that we have already added the entire logic, we can remove the stub return 1 which we had. So this concludes our entire script. So to summarize, what we did is we took the name as a parameter of the worksheet name, which we'll see how to give from Power Automate in a while. Now, once we have the name, we are first checking whether the worksheet with the name already exists. If the workbook.get worksheet returns null, that means there is no worksheet with that name. So next what we did is we added a worksheet. We got the range and from A1 to B1 here because we just need two columns, and then we set the table names to ID, column names to ID and response dumps. Next, using this range, we created a new table so that we can perform the tabular operations. So once we did that, we got the rows of all the values which were entered in the table in the dump sheet. And after that, we did two steps, which is pretty simple. The first one is we added those rows to the new table in the new worksheet. And then we deleted the rows from the old worksheet. And we returned 1 if this all succeeded. And if we found out that the worksheet name already exists, then we return 0. So for that, we have a function with the return as a number. So for renaming the script, we click on script 2. Here we can rename the script as copy dump to worksheet. You can name it as anything you want. Now let's save the script. So once this is saved, our job in this particular place is done. So that is in Excel is done. Now let us move to Power Automate. So for people who are not familiar with Power Automate, so this is a service given by the Power Platform where you can create automatic workflows, or you can code certain actions or certain set of actions which you want to perform every day or at a particular point of time or at a particular trigger or with a particular click or anything like that. And this is basically a low code mechanism where you're not actually going to write code. Rather, you have connectors which will help you perform certain actions without writing the code itself. So now let's see how to run this Excel script from a Power Automate workflow. So for that, let us create a Power Automate workflow. So now you have a set of options which you can do. Automated workflow, scheduled workflow, instant workflow. So for the sake of this demo, let us call an instant workflow, where instant workflow means on click of something, we have to trigger this flow. So on click of maybe when you select a file or for an item in SharePoint, or if it is invoked from an HTTP API which you have written, which might not be existing in the same tenant. It can be any API you have written for your own application. So now for this demo, we'll be using a manual trigger. Let us name it as Office Scripts Workflow. So let us create. Now it goes to the editor where it has already initialized it with an action where it is a manual click. So on the click of this action, we need the name of the sheet, right, from the user. So for that, we need to add an input. So it will be a text input, and let us name the input variable as sheet name. And we don't need to enter an input as of now because we'll be getting that from the user. So now the next step we need to do is we need to run the script itself. So for executing the script, we will be using the Excel Online connector. And in this connector, we have a lot of actions. So there is a action for running the scripts which we write in Automate, that is Office scripts. So we'll be using this run script action. So we need to select 4 parameters for stats. So the first one is location, which will be OneDrive for Business, as I've hosted this Excel in OneDrive. And the document library will be OneDrive because it will be auto-populated for you. And for the file, click on the folders and you will be able to see the entire folder structure of your OneDrive here. So I'll select our file, which is Office Scripts Demo, as you can see here. Now for scripts, it will load all the scripts which you saved in that in your particular account in the OneDrive Excel sheets. So the scripts is not bound to an Excel file. So even if I create a new Excel file and I try to open this automate tab, I will be able to see the script which I had created in this Excel file. So the scripts are universal because we are sending a workbook, we are sending the workbook as a parameter. So if you write a generic script, it can work for more than one Excel file, just so you know. So here we will copy dump to worksheet. So now, because we have selected the script, it has populated an additional parameter which is name. So as you can see here, name is a parameter which we have apart from the default parameters. So for giving the input which was given by the user in the trigger, we need to select this, and we can select all the, we can see all the dynamic options which were created in the previous steps in the dynamic content. So here we can see sheet name, which was our variable which we declared here. So we can use sheet name here. Now in a new step, we can add a control where we can add a condition. Now that we have the script which is actually going to return a number based on the status, either 1 or 0, we can capture that result. So if you see, in dynamic content, we have two more parameters for this step, which has come from the previous step, that is run script. So let us select result. So if result is equal to 1, then we can add an action, which will basically again be an Excel action. Here we are going to add a row into a table. So let us select the same Excel workbook. So if you see, it will give you an option for status. So if I open the track flow status sheet, there is a table with one column, that is status. So this shows that we have selected the right table. And now we add an expression. We can even write the string here, which is passed. And we again add a row in case of failure. We select the trigger and we select an action, add row. Again, we select our location, the document library, file, the table, and here it will be failed. So that concludes our workflow in Power Automate. So let us save this. As a recap, we first added a manual trigger with the variable sheet name as a text field. Then we added a step to run the script, which will basically take the sheet name as an input and it will give a result of whether it passed or failed. And based on whether it passed or failed, we add an entry in another table in the same file. So now let us test. I'll perform a trigger action, save and test. Now in the trigger action, let's give permissions. Yeah. So for trigger action, it will ask you for the sheet name. So let us give the sheet name as test dump script. So let's see if this succeeds. So it will redirect you to the flow page where it is executing each step. Now if there is an error, we will be able to see an error here. Let's hope this succeeds. So it ran the script successfully. If you see, the body has a result of 1. And based on the condition we gave, it was going to choose yes because the condition succeeded because the result was 1. So it won't execute the failure one. And for the success, we had told it to set the status to passed. Now you will see that there are no rows in the dump, and there is a new sheet if you look here, which is test dump script. If you look at the test dump script, you will see that all the rows have been copied here, which was actually there in the dump. So that concludes the video. I will add the documentation of Office scripts in the description box below so that you can refer to the additional functions as well as methods you can use to write automation scripts in Excel and for Excel. And I will also add my LinkedIn account if you want to connect with me in the future, or if you have any doubts or questions or suggestions of videos which you want in the future. And you can also drop some video suggestions in the comments box below. So, hope to see you guys soon. Thanks a lot for watching.